You sent the message. You saw it was read. And then, nothing. No reply. No acknowledgement. No explanation. Just silence on the other side of a screen that you know, with complete certainty, is being held by a person who chose not to respond. That feeling, that specific, particular, quietly devastating feeling. Most people describe it as something close to physical. A tightening. A hollow. Something that sits in the chest and doesn't move. And if you've ever thought, this shouldn't hurt this much. It's just a message. It's just someone not replying. I'm being ridiculous. You are wrong. You are not being ridiculous. You are not being oversensitive. The pain you feel when you are ignored is neurologically, biologically, evolutionarily real. And it is far more serious than the people ignoring you will ever understand. Let's go back to the UCLA brain scanner we've mentioned before. The same researcher, Naomi Eisenberger, and the same finding that social pain activates the same brain regions as physical pain. But there is something specific about being ignored, about what psychologists call the silent treatment or social ostracism, that goes even further than ordinary social rejection. Being outright rejected, someone saying no, someone disagreeing, someone arguing with you, still acknowledges your existence. It confirms that you are real, that you are seen, that your presence registers in another person's world. There is something in even hostile acknowledgement that the brain can work with. But being ignored is different. Being ignored says something else entirely. It says, you are not worth responding to. You are not worth the energy of a reply. Your presence, your message, your attempt at connection, none of it is significant enough to warrant acknowledgement. The brain does not process this as social discomfort. It processes this as a threat to existence itself. There is a researcher named Kipling Williams who has spent decades studying what he calls ostracism, the experience of being excluded, ignored, and rendered invisible by others. His research has produced some of the most striking findings in modern social psychology. In one study, Williams had participants play the same virtual ball-tossing game we've described before. Some participants were excluded from the game. The other players simply stopped throwing them the ball. What Williams found was not just that exclusion was painful. It was that even when participants were told the other players were members of groups they despised, people whose values they actively rejected, being ignored by them still hurt. The pain of ostracism was triggered regardless of whether the person doing the ignoring was someone whose opinion should have mattered. The brain doesn't ask, does this person's approval count? It asks, am I being seen? Am I real? Do I exist in someone else's perception? And when the answer is no, when the silence says no, the alarm fires. Every time, without exception, Williams developed a framework called the temporal need-threat model. He found that ostracism threatens 4 fundamental human needs simultaneously: the need to belong, the need for control, the need for meaningful existence, and the need for self-esteem. When you are ignored, all 4 are threatened at once. Not one of them, all 4, in a single moment of silence. This is why being ignored feels so disproportionately large. It is not targeting one part of your psychological architecture. It is hitting the entire structure at once. And what Williams also found, perhaps the most disturbing part of all his research, is that the brain's initial response to being ignored is identical whether the ostracism lasts for a few minutes or for years. The first moment of being ignored fires the same alarm as chronic, prolonged social exclusion. The brain does not wait to assess the duration. It responds immediately, at full intensity, every single time. There is something else happening beneath all of this that rarely gets talked about. Being ignored is not just painful in the moment. It is destabilizing in a very specific way. Because silence is unresolvable. It gives you nothing to work with. When someone rejects you directly, says something harsh, ends things explicitly, tells you they don't want contact, it is painful. But it is closed. The loop has an ending. The brain can file it, process it, begin to move through it. But silence leaves everything open. Every possible interpretation is still available. Maybe they're busy. Maybe they didn't see it. Maybe they're angry. Maybe they've decided something about you that they haven't said. The brain, which cannot tolerate unresolved ambiguity, fills that silence with the worst available explanations, and then sits with them, unable to resolve them because resolution requires a response that never comes. Silence is not the absence of a message. Silence is the cruelest kind of message there is, because it forces you to write it yourself. So what do you do when you are being ignored? The honest answer is that there is no quick fix. The neurological and psychological pain of ostracism is real, and it needs to be acknowledged as real, not dismissed, not minimized, not told it shouldn't hurt this much. What the research points to is something Williams calls the fortification response, reconnecting, quickly, genuinely, with other sources of belonging, other people who do see you, other contexts where you do exist in someone else's world, not to replace the person who ignored you, not to pretend the pain isn't there, but to remind the ancient system that is screaming in your chest that one silence is not the verdict on your existence. Because it isn't. One person's choice not to respond says everything about their capacity for basic human decency, and nothing at all, about your worth.